Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Bill Oram here, sports columnist at the Oregonian, joined once again by my partner in crime, our friend Brenna Greene, who is back from vacation. Brenna, welcome back. How are you?
Yeah, I went to the Philippines and then Tyson comes on and goes to Africa this week. So what exotic locale are you going to next week?
I'm probably going to have to go to Hillsborough at some point next week.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know. You guys have me. You guys have me questioning some of my how I use my free time or my vacation days, but also 2 kids. It's Little League season. I'm not going anywhere.
Yep. Your most exotic locale is Murray Hill.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Brenna, we have a lot to unpack. Probably going to get some of your vacation into this podcast. We're going to talk about the end of the Pac-12, Beaver baseball, softball, really Oregon and Oregon State both kind of going out with a whimper in the Pac-12, at least in both baseball and softball. We're going to talk some WNBA. There's been movement on that front since you were last here. Thorns, the Pilots are, amidst, their best season in 40 years, 30 years. So we're going to get to all of that. But where I want to start, Brenna, and I want to start with state track and the fact that last Saturday at state track, the winner of the 200-meter sprint was a trans girl from McDaniel High School. And, this has been covered widely. I've written a column about this issue. But the fact that this student was booed upon crossing the finish line, it's obviously a super hot button issue in the track community. And I wrote a column this week that essentially said that the discourse around this subject was out of hand and the conversation was being had by the wrong people. The right wing, talkers, television talkers, radio talkers, Clay Travis, Piers Morgan. And what I want to say about this before we get to everything else is what this situation requires to figure out an answer is compassion and empathy. And what I saw in the discourse this week after my column was a lot of anger and a lot of hate. And I think when people want to approach the issue of trans athletes, you kind of tell on yourself pretty quickly with how you approach the issue. And, when I saw people say this boy or this man or he's a boy, what you're essentially doing is you are stripping the athlete of her humanity and her personhood, and you're calling her a liar. And what I wrote in the column that I want to be very clear about is there is no broad-based evidence of athletes abusing, the openness to trans participation to win ribbons or sprints or, to be more competitive against girls because they couldn't hack it against boys. That doesn't exist. There's no evidence that exists. And so many arguments start from that place, and it's bad faith because that doesn't exist. And what I want to see is good faith conversations going forward on this issue. I'm not saying that the OSAA has it exactly right now, that their policy on it is specific enough or has the proper verbiage. I just want to see the right people having the conversations going forward. And that is women in sports, that is members of the trans community, it's school administrators, and not these loud braying, look at me people on the internet. And those are the internet cretins I talked about, by the way. That is Clay Travis. That is Piers Morgan. That is some of the people on Twitter as well. But I want those people to shut up and get out of the way so that the people in our state or at the high school level can have serious good faith conversations that are going to create an inclusive and fair landscape for all athletes, for girls, for trans athletes, and that we can kind of move forward on this issue. But what is so frustrating to me is the meanness and the lack of humanity. And it is just not an issue, Brenna, that is suited to the way we talk about sports, right? Like we debate about sports and it's like we can argue and there's there's a resolution or there's, we can kind of stake our claim to a right side or wrong side. There is so much there's just so much so much gray area with this issue. And where I want to start this conversation is from a place of compassion and empathy and curiosity and a desire to understand the perspectives of the people really involved. And that is, all the athletes, including the trans athletes, and we need to look out for all of them. So that is my addendum to what I wrote this week. I'm curious, how did you view the situation? How did you view the booing at the end of the race? I know there are people who say that the boos weren't for the athlete, they were for the systems that allowed, a trans athlete to win a state championship. Go ahead.
Yeah, like that doesn't matter. She's the one that's crossing the finish line, and she's the one who has to reconcile those boos. So you weren't doing anything productive there. I'm sorry. All the message you are sending is one to her, no matter what. And I personally, obviously, I knew about the situation going into the state championships. I did not know about the booing until I read your column, because I was kind of a little bit checked out, as I should be on vacation. The whole situation is, she is competing where she is supposed to be competing right now per the rules. And therefore, I totally understand, people who are upset in terms of the fact it's such a difficult area at this level in particular, at this level, at this age. So I can understand people who are upset about it. I totally get that. But like you said, there are productive ways to have this conversation, and then there are completely unproductive ways to have this conversation. And you are having a conversation, even if it is one-sided. If you are booing at an event like that, that is a conversation. And there are so many other... Yeah, if you start the conversation, like you said, in the way that, that's not a conversation now. That's not a conversation.
You are immediately, like I said, dehumanizing the athlete you're talking about and stripping them of not just their identity, but their kind of existence, right? And so, and when you start by calling them a liar, what kind of doors are you opening about their motives and why they're there? And why does anyone compete? She's competing because she feels drawn to the event, to the sport, to the competition, and and having a place in the community and the strength. I mean, there's so many reasons that people compete in athletics, and just the notion that this student would have changed their entire,
oh my gosh,
self-identity, gender, in pursuit of winning the 200-meter state championship is just. And maybe there aren't. Maybe I'm giving too much oxygen to people who believe that or think that. But I've heard it enough. It doesn't happen. And try to have some empathy for the idea of what that person would be putting themselves through to win a race. It doesn't track logically. And I just, I don't know exactly what the week has, or the last 5 weeks, frankly, have looked like for this girl. But try to imagine what she has opened herself up to by participating,
by simply doing the action of running, which most of us can do.
And we should all have some empathy for what she has opened herself up to. And if you let yourself have that empathy, I think you would also have some admiration for her, because that is brave. It's courageous. Because, maybe she couldn't quite imagine what the reaction would be when she crossed the finish line, or what that would feel like. But she certainly knew that, she was not going to be popular among certain groups of people, and she did it anyway. And I do admire that. So I expect this is going to be an issue that's going to continue to come up in sports, globally, locally, prep sports, especially, a fraught space. But I just would encourage anyone who's listening to this, you can disagree with me and Brenna completely. You can, if your opinion is that, trans athletes, should not race, whatever, you're welcome to your opinion, but I would just ask you to, really start from a place of empathy and compassion, and then let's have a conversation. And don't listen to I don't know. If there are people who seem like they're like seizing on this moment for their own personal gain, like those are the people you need to avoid. Like, why are these people talking about this? Why do they care about what's happening in Oregon? They don't care. I promise you they don't care. Clay Travis does not care. All right, Brenna.
I can only imagine your mentions this week.
Easier subjects, and we talked about your vacation to the Philippines, which started like most vacations, especially overseas vacations from Portland, start at Portland International Airport. And Brenna, sorry to do this to you, but I have to ask.
Oh boy!
So on Instagram,
yes,
you started your vacation with this post of the PDX carpet, the current PDX carpet. Right?
Yes.
And said, if you know, you know. But then you post a selfie of yourself wearing this sweatshirt with the real PDX carpet.
Didn't know I was.
And so what I want to know, Brenna, is do you know? Do you know? Because real ones know that the new PDX carpet is not the PDX carpet. People who are taking pictures of their feet on the new PDX carpet are latecomers. They are not real Portlanders. And I always bristle when I see people take pictures of the new PDX carpet. That is why in the renovations of Portland International Airport, they are bringing back the old carpet. So I just have to ask, Brenna, do you know?
I think that what I meant by posting that carpet, I was not prepared for an argument question. Not an argument. It was a little bit tongue in cheek in a way. It was like, where else in the world did we post our carpet from an airport? And yes, that this is the Portland Airport carpet if you have been to said airport, because it is not the actual carpet, and we have issues with that. So yeah, it was a little bit like tongue in cheek. It was like, if you know, this is also like not, we post our carpet, but this isn't like the real carpet. And then we had the PDX sweatshirt, which is one of my favorite sweatshirts, if not my favorite.
It's a great sweatshirt. It's a great sweatshirt.
You know what? I'll say it. Shout out to the Trailblazers. Thank you guys. Anyways, continue.
I don't know that they were great uniforms, but I think that the merch around it was pretty sweet. Okay, we've established that you do know.
Yes,
and
I do know.
But you can appreciate the irony of those two showing up on your Instagram story.
Absolutely,
back to back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm a fine lover of all things ironic. So there you go. It may have been a little bit intentional as well.
Like, I feel like that's like one of those Instagram reels. It's like, we're from Portland. We're lovers of all things that are ironic. We're from Portland. We drink microbrews for breakfast. We're from Portland. Anyway. Okay. Welcome back from vacation. Thank you for letting me have my fun with that. Turning our attention to actual relevant sports right now. Pac-12 baseball tournament is going on. Today, we're recording this on Friday, is the semifinals of the Pac-12 baseball tournament. And neither the Oregon Ducks, who reached a super regional last year and were just a few outs away from reaching the College World Series for the first time in 76 years, 67 years.
As we sat in the box panicking about how to get to Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
That was a joint experience last year.
So the Ducks are out of the Pac-12 tournament. They're gonna play in the postseason. Obviously, they're still in the mix there. They dropped 2 games to SC and Utah. Oregon State, which entered the tournament as the number 2 seed, and Oregon State, Brenna, you might have been in the Philippines for this, but I'm sure you know. Oregon State was 3 outs away from winning the Pac-12 regular season title.
Correct.
At Arizona. They blistered Arizona in the first 2 games. Third game, they go up in the 9th inning. All they need to do is get 3 outs and be done. They give up 2 runs, lose the game, and go in as the 2 seed, lose their first game in the Pac-12 tournament, and then win yesterday, but due to the rules of the Pac-12 baseball tournament, which I'm really not sure why we have anyway, they do not advance despite beating Arizona State. How surprised are you that we didn't see the Beavers at least advance to the semis? Or do you think the tournament format makes it just sort of, it is what it is?
College baseball tournaments are a weird thing. Yeah. As evidenced by the fact that Oregon hosted a super regional last year. So I can get behind just tournaments being weird. Unfortunately, this is now a trend for the Beavers where they kind of limp into the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if they should still get a regional, but they'll definitely not get a super regional now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really disappointing for a team that has been, they've had their ups and downs this season.
Pretty locked in, frankly, all year in kind of that top 8.
So it's frustrating that I don't know what's up with them in the end of May, but yeah, this is the second year in a row now where they go into the postseason and they can't get it done for whatever reason. So yeah, we'll probably have a regional next. I would be shocked. I'd be stunned if they aren't hosting a regional next week, which, last year they didn't even get that.
It would be a pretty precipitous drop for them because it's the top 16, right? That would host regionals. I think so. Even though I think they're slipping out of the top 10 with probably not. No, because they won yesterday. If they'd lost yesterday, I think they might have slipped out of the top 10, but they're slipping out of the top 8. So hosting a regional, probably not a super regional unless a lot of weird stuff happens at the top. But I mean, that could still happen. The more interesting question, because Oregon State, is going to be in the mix. They could still win a national championship. They're good enough to win a national championship. They're certainly good enough to get to Omaha still. Path gets a little tougher if they don't host the super regional, right? As you said.
Yeah.
The bigger question, and I'm going to put these 2 things sort of side by side, because, and maybe you'd heard some of this as well over the last couple of weeks if the news traveled to the Philippines, but there was some chatter out of Corvallis that a lot of those softball players from the softball team, 21 and 29 this year, I believe, were entering the transfer portal. Yesterday, we got a glimpse of what that actually looks like. And the list of players from Oregon State softball who are going in the transfer portal is pretty much exhaustive. It is basically the entire team. Yeah. I'd have to go line for line, but essentially the entire softball team is in the transfer portal. Which just follows the trend that we've seen in almost every other major sport. And so the question that I've had basically all spring, all winter, was what is going to happen to baseball? Is baseball going to be able to stiff arm kind of the impact of realignment that has basically devastated Oregon State in every other place? And what I would, and you've heard Scott Barnes talk a lot about, an independent baseball schedule next year. Not playing the WCC, but playing this independent national level schedule commensurate with, a national power, which of course Oregon State is, 3 national championships. Is that going to be enough to keep this baseball program intact? And, baseball, not the big NIL sport program, maybe players are motivated by slightly different things in baseball, whatever, yada, yada, yada. Joe Freeman, my colleague here at the Oregonian, co-host of the Beaver Banter podcast with Nick Daschel, had a good story this week where he talked to a few key players from the Oregon State team, Trent Caraway, Gavin Turley, Eric Segura, all said in some form, like, we want to come back. Brenna, this has been like the issue of the year, maybe the issue of the century at Oregon State, right? Trying to keep these teams together. And maybe I'm too fresh off of the women's basketball defections. But you're talking about a women's basketball team that reached the Elite Eight, was going to basically bring back their entire roster, was probably going to be a preseason top 5 team, was going to be moving to the WCC, but was going to build out a national schedule. They were going to play UConn. They were going to play South Carolina. Like the preseason schedule was going to be, screw it. It was going to be lit. Like it was going to be awesome.
Yeah.
But everyone left anyway. I would really interested to hear what you say about this, because I'm really skeptical. I'm just really skeptical. Maybe it's because Damian Martinez said, Beaver stuck with me. I'm a Beaver for life. He's gone. The women's basketball team is all gone. Do you have confidence that sort of these positive rumblings coming out of the baseball program mean that like baseball is going to be the one program that bucks the trend at Oregon State?
The only thing that is different about baseball is that there is really a capability of actually being an independent baseball school and having that be, a feasible option. But even then, it doesn't feel super feasible. I mean, it's tough. You're going to have to try to make sure that you are every former Pac-12 team's bye week, basically, in order to build a schedule. And, a lot of those teams are like, I'm sorry, I would much rather play Utah Valley and rest everybody, So, like, it's still going to be tough. Yeah, I feel cynical about it as well. We'll see how things go. We'll see how the cookie crumbles. But, unfortunately, when we have watched program after program crumble there, it's really hard to believe that there would be one that somehow wouldn't. Especially when, like I said, there is a path to being independent in baseball, but it's not super easy.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't think people, like, college baseball is such a weird thing because of the way that schedules work out. So, like, we'll talk about them in a little bit, but, like, okay, Oregon State and UP baseball play on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Neither one of those teams are trotting out their starting pitcher that day.
Yeah.
So you're not getting the best of the best. And so it's really hard to it's not impossible, but Oregon State's number 4, number 5, whatever pitcher in the starting rotation is much different than UP's number 4 or number 5 starting pitcher in that rotation. There's going to be way more of a drop off. And so if you're going to go play these other teams, you're going to go play USC on a Tuesday. Well, that's not really indicative of really where each team is. And so it's a really it's different than a lot of other college sports and how it is operated. So yeah, I mean, I hope that Beaver baseball can keep it together, but I just, man, it's people can say a lot of things, as we've seen. People can say a lot of things. I mean, we had, it's still like I get it, I understand it, but Talia von Oelhoffen coming out and calling them America's team and then 3 days later being in the transfer portal, when that sort of thing happens, it's really hard to trust anybody. So, yeah, that one's still in my gut, kind of goes,
yeah.
So, she knew in that moment what she was going to be doing. I would imagine. I mean, who knows?
Sure.
But
I mean, yeah, it's human nature.
yeah.
Here's
So
I have 2 points on this. And
yeah,
I think you're spot on. Like we are conditioned to believe that it's going to fall apart. And God, wouldn't it be great if one of them didn't? But like my belief level in this, doesn't go much higher than that. But there's two points I want to make about that. And obviously women's basketball is the closest comp we have to baseball, right? Just in terms of like the current level at which they're competing.
yes.
What there would be to come back for. Obviously Bazana is going to go, number 1 or 2 in the MLB draft, but they have a lot of guys coming back too. One thing that has kind of come out of the woodwork about the women's basketball program, and like if you were around that team, there was a lot of talk about like, we're focused on this season right now. We'll talk about everything else when it gets here. We will deal with it after the season. Football, I think there was a lot of that. Like Jonathan Smith, I'm just asking these guys to like lock in through this season. And what I liked about what the baseball program has done and what Joe Freeman was able to unearth with his story this week, I really do. If you have any interest in this subject, I would go read it just because I think this is such an important ongoing issue. Joe does great work, especially on Oregon State baseball for us. And the headline on that is key Oregon State baseball players excited about Beaver's future, plan to stick around and build on success. Very rosy sort of messaging from the team. One thing that's in that story is that in the middle of the season, Mitch Canham, obviously the Beavers coach, sort of recognized kind of the noise around everything. And they did have a meeting, and I'm trying to find it in the story. I'd love to quote from it if I can, but they definitely, they got together and had a meeting to basically talk about this issue. And so, this is in the wake of the women's basketball team defections. This is Joe Freeman, and I quote, "With those staggering events hovering over Corvallis, Canham decided it was time to gather his players for a chat about the future. Never mind that the 6th-ranked Beavers were in the thick of their Pac-12 schedule and chasing a trip to Omaha, or that most coaches shy away from detouring from their one-day-at-a-time guiding light. Canham wanted to be honest and upfront with his players while he still had a chance." And I think that is so important. And, I love the line, like, while he still had a chance. Because if we could have, a very candid Scott Rueck, I think Scott would probably say something to the effect of, season ends, and you think then it's time to like go, now it's time to recruit your players to stay. And like you alluded to with Talia, and I'm thinking at least a couple of those other players, I think Tamia Gardner knew what she was going to do. And this is fine. I mean, this is the system that they're operating in. I don't mean to call them out individually for their decisions, but I think Scott would acknowledge that, okay, it's time to like get ready to buy back in and start thinking about next year. Well, these kids have already been thinking about next year, and in certain cases have already made up their minds. So I think that what Mitch Canham did, and I think talking about it is also smart, is, he started talking about next year a lot earlier and getting those guys and the coaching staff, by the way, it's all in the story that, kind of went down the line with this coaching staff, Joey Wong, and said like, are you still in? And they all said yes. And so I'm still with you. I'm still cynical. I still need to see it to believe it. But I do think that for a variety of reasons, baseball has maybe positioned itself better. I mean, that clubhouse has a tremendous culture. It dates back, 30 years. And, obviously Mitch Canham is a product of that culture, and he's put his own fingerprints on that program. Very, very, very strong culture. He's not, I mean, I say this, right? I mean, I believe anything at this point. Mitch Canham's not jumping to Michigan State, 2 days after the end of the season. So I think that there's a better chance that baseball does weather the storm, but it wouldn't surprise, nothing will surprise me now. So it wouldn't surprise me if it does not. The other point I wanted to make, when you talk about a national schedule or an independent schedule, Oregon State's gonna have to go on the road a lot next year.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna those marquee games that th're going to play, like you want to schedule LSU. Is LSU coming here? Like, why would they have to? So I think you're gonna see a lot of Oregon State on the road in those marquee games, and a lot of like the South Dakota states in Corvallis. And I hope I'm wrong on that, and maybe there'll probably be some exceptions. But for the most part, I think you're going to see a worse home schedule, at least in year one. And like, that's unfortunate for the fans because, I mean, talk about a terrific, in-game experience. a really excited fan base, obviously. You're not going to be having the Arizona State, Stanford, USC, Oregon. I mean, you might get Oregon. Actually, I take that back. But it's going to be different. The schedule at Goss next year.
Yeah, there's no way around it. And yeah, it's very difficult to it's difficult to think about for a program that, has been consistently one of the top 10 baseball programs in the country over the last however many years.
And I think so football takes the cake, right, in terms of the footprint and the attention and the eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
But within Oregon State University, the baseball program is the crown jewel. That is the gem of the athletics department. And so, I mean, maybe I've said this about football, maybe I said it about women's basketball, but now that we're down to the spring sports, I'm very much this is the one that if you could keep one intact, you want to keep Oregon State baseball intact. I know it's not the moneymaker, but from an institutional identity, this is the one you want to keep intact. So I suspect they've been hard at work. I know that, the Damnation Collective, I know those guys a little bit. I'm sure that they've been, extremely aggressive with feeling out what the baseball situation is going to require going forward. Okay, Brenna, we have a billionaire arms race going on in Oregon. You know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about the WNBA. Last time you were on the podcast, before you went to the Philippines, before your carpet snafu, you made a comment that I supported, a very vague, mysterious comment about how there were multiple groups pursuing a WNBA bid. And I had heard the same, right? And I ended up writing shortly after that conversation. This has been a bit of an open secret in certain circles in Portland and Oregon sports. The two groups, as I reported going on 2 weeks ago now, I guess, are the Bethal family, who bought the Thorns earlier this year from Merritt Paulson, and a group called the Monarch Collective, which is a fund based out of Los Angeles that has that was basically formed to buy and operate women's sports teams. And so, one of the founders there, Kara Nortman, was a co-founder of Angel City, the NWSL team in Los Angeles. It's been wildly successful, has tons of celebrity ownership, really successful there. They have an NWSL. They were behind an NWSL team in Boston. And, you might be thinking, okay, a fund, Los Angeles, what is this? And, the thing that I think needs to be stressed about them, the Bethals, we have a face, we know exactly who that is. Monarch has billionaire owners backing their effort. Those people have not gone public yet. I've had a lot of conversations around this. I could tell you what I know. I will tell you what I know, but it's going to sound a little vague. But it is a couple, both kind of self-made entrepreneurial billionaires, and with including, it's kind of a woman-led bid from the standpoint of the wife, who is, a self-made rich person. So that's what you kind of know about Monarch. But here's where the arms race of it all comes in, and I'm really fascinated to see how you view this, and also how you would separate these two things. So I reported that among the people, flyaway pen, among the people that Monarch is bringing in, so they have the billionaire backing, but then the way Monarch operates, and I mentioned all the celebrities on the ground with Angel City, is they bring in a syndicate of people who, are investors, and they are, restaurateurs, they're, other prominent people in the community, athletes. And the idea is, they gain something from being an investor. They build relationships. They, kind of build their portfolio. And then also hits boom, hey, we're going to see that person sitting courtside cheering for, our, Rose City team. So the biggest name currently attached to that bid, quite excitingly, I think for most Portlanders, is Damian Lillard.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and so that was something we confirmed and had kind of had been in the wind, but hadn't been out there. Damian Lillard is in the camp of the Monarch Collective bid for a WNBA team. The Bethals, billionaire investors in their own right, part owners of the Sacramento Kings. They're already in Portland with the NWSL. They, as of yesterday, now have a relationship with, among other people, Tim Boyle, the CEO of Columbia. Now, here's where the nuance is. Tim Boyle is not necessarily part of their WNBA bid at this point that we know of. He is an investor in the Thorns, along with a handful of other people who came into the mix yesterday, including former NBA player Josh Childress, who went to Stanford. But Tim Boyle is now an associate business partner of the Bethals with the Thorns. It's very easy to connect the dots to seeing him being involved with a WNBA bid.
Yeah.
These are two separate bids. They are not going to merge. These are not going to be this is not going to become like the Avengers. Okay? I have that on good authority. So how then, Brenna, does, and I don't know, maybe I'm ahead of myself here. Like, I am very confident this is going to happen. The WNBA is going to identify one group of investors, and then Portland is in the mix with other cities that are going to be launching bids. We've talked about kind of the timeline, but I'm extremely confident that Portland is eventually going to be awarded a team in the next cycle. So the question is, if you are Kathy Engelbert, put on your Kathy Engelbert hat for a moment. Do you need to go get it, or do you have it there by you?
I just happen to have it right here. Crazy.
So now that you have your Kathy Engelbert hat on, what are you valuing in ownership in Portland, and how would you view these two competing efforts to get Portland's WNBA bid? They're both women-led. They both have the money. If those things are equal, how do you differentiate the two?
Well, I do really like what the Batals have going on right now. Like, and there's been a lot of talk about, them opening, if they were to get a WNBA team, they would open like a practice facility that would both cater to the Thorns and to a WNBA team, which I think is a really cool idea and great synergy there. So, and the fact that they already own a team in this town, I think gives them a leg up. I guess it's a question of, because it's not like these Monarch investors are not known by the WNBA. Like, this is a group that has been, put together for a while. So it becomes do you want to go with this group of people who are more known? I guess probably. I would imagine they are more known to the league than the other group. And so do you go with that, or do you go with the situation that is a little bit more synergy-like for the city? I mean, you have both those two. I personally think that I would go for option number 2.
Monarch.
What'd you say?
You'd go for Monarch. You go for the Bethals. Okay.
I'd go for the Bethals.
Okay.
Because then you can have this cross promotion going on between both teams. They're feeding into each other. They're both playing at the same time. It also means that you're not going to have a situation where, one's kind of stepping on the other because they're both owned by the same group. And also you have this really revolutionary idea of having a practice facility that is both for soccer and basketball players, which I think is a very cool idea. So for me, I kind of come on the side of that one, but I can also understand them saying we want to go with the group of people who are more who've put in probably a little bit more legwork with the league overall. So it's truly fascinating. I don't know. I don't think we're going to have any resolution. This is just me and seeing how the WNBA has operated over the past however many months, which is, not it. Expansion hasn't exactly been the quickest process over there. So I don't think we're going to have any sort of resolution on this. I would look, I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see it happening until next summer. So we still have a lot of time to we still have a lot of time for things to fall apart with one of the groups, which unfortunately we already saw happen. So, once again, this is another conditioned person over here. Just a different situation.
I do want to say, just on that note, just because since you introduced this, and I wrote this in the column, but
yeah,
whichever direction the WNBA goes, whichever group they land on, and I love that this is sort of like WNBA Shark Tank. It's like you've got two offers on the table. Like you've got to choose. You got it. Mark Cuban's just sitting there, like laughing his tail off because he's like, you got to choose one, Kathy Engelbert. Which one you going to take? Either group presents such a more just is it better? I guess is just a more complete option and a more stable and capable ownership and proven ownership than what the WNBA was prepared to reward last fall, with Kirk Brown, who ended up, backing out. And I think ultimately, so this delays Portland's timeline on getting a WNBA team, which is unfortunate because with Kirk Brown, this team is going to start playing in 2025. So next summer. This has pushed it, but it does make me feel like Portland has actually ended up in a better place in terms of its ownership going forward. So as long as the team still gets here, the delay is unfortunate, but I think that it's actually going to be better positioned for success with either of these groups than it would have been under the previous plan. I don't know if I necessarily want to pick a horse, in this, and I know I asked you to. What I think there's a couple of things.
You have professional relationships to you have more professional relationships to protect over there than I probably do in this situation. So there you go.
Well, I just think about it like, the Bethals would want to get involved because they are in Portland. There's an opportunity to sort of like build a women's sports, empire in Portland. Yep. Portland is positioned to become, one of a global leader in women's sports, potentially, given the huge success of the Thorns. You're going to have you're going to have the women's Final Four here. You're going to have, a WNBA team. I think there's a real opportunity for Portland. The sports bra is going to start having a national footprint. That all started in Portland. So I think, the Bethals' interest here is all of that, and the fact that they are already starting to build out operations in Portland. Monarch has an interest in the WNBA, like just flat out, period. Like they're coming into this like, how do we get involved with the WNBA? Who is the right ownership for that, and what is the right market? And they've decided on Portland. I think they're excited about Portland. But for like Monarch, the question that I would ask if I was Kathy Engelbert is, does it have to be Portland? Or could we put, their ownership group, could we put them in Austin or Nashville, Denver? But I've also had conversations with people about the Bethals, like, it doesn't have to be Portland for them either. Like when it comes to basketball, Sacramento might make more sense. There is an effort, kind of underway in Sacramento. I mean, ironically, the Monarchs were very successful and popular in the first wave of the WNBA in Sacramento. So there is a thirst in Sacramento to get back in the WNBA mix. But the problem is we just named like 6 cities that make sense to have the WNBA. They're not all going to have a WNBA team in this cycle. There's going to be 2 more is the plan by 2028. And so the WNBA is going to have to be really thoughtful about this. And if the WNBA does like the idea of having the Bethals and Monarch and Monarch's ownership, because again, Monarch is an arm, like sort of like a facilitator, probably more like it's not, Monarch would not own the team. Monarch is facilitating a deal for these billionaires. But if they like both of those, how do you get both of them? Well, maybe it's that you have the Thals in Portland and you direct, this other group somewhere else. I think what you lose by doing that, though, is what is a really thoughtful approach to community building, a really grassroots approach to a professional sports team. Damian Lillard's a little bit like, it's almost unfair. It's a little unfair to be like, but we have Dame on our side, because who would say no to that, right? Like, who's going to say no to having Damian Lillard back at basketball games in the Moda Center, into perpetuity? So it's complex, it's fascinating, but ultimately, I think it's really promising for the future of women's basketball, women's sports in Portland. And again, like, I've been really confident about this, and you can see the recent TikTok or Instagram reel that we did about me and my jersey that I refuse to eat because this is happening. But I mean, I was told the other day that it's probably 95% that Portland's getting a team. So if it's 95% that Portland's going to get a WNBA team, it really is just a matter of making sure the right people are in charge of it.
And you know what? Can I just say this? Those right people, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Portland Fire, baby. That's all I got to say. Name
but
it
here's the
Portland Fire.
Brenna, but the problem with that, and I loved the Fire. I loved Jackie Stiles. Jackie Stiles, a former guest on this podcast. I will point to that every chance I get. Jackie Stiles, who was the former scoring leader of NCAA women's basketball before Kelsey Plum and Caitlin Clark came along. But I will say, the Portland Fire becomes a little more problematic given what our summers have become in the last 25 years since the Portland Fire played here. It may be a little too real, unfortunately. But what it can't be, let me tell you, is the dog poop name that Kirk Brown favored for the team. Which, if for anyone who has forgotten, I reported back in October as this was all falling apart because they were very far down the line. Right? Like, there was an announcement scheduled, all of this. The name that Kirk Brown liked and Kathy Engelbert was not a fan of was the Rose City Royalty. So just don't see us going to the Royalty games. Like, no. So Royalty's out. And back to the drawing board. But I am very excited for this because naming things is one of my ultimate favorite activities. I could fill days worth of column space with proposed names. I've had a real run of success, by the way. Last year, I suggested that any expansion team in Oregon should be named the Exploding Whales. And then literally the next day, the Eugene Emeralds announced an alternate mascot, which was the Exploding Whales. It was a coincidence. I actually did not know. That was not me jumping the whale, in that I knew and acted like it was my idea. We literally came to that independently at almost exactly the same time, which is hilarious. By the way, totally non sequitur. The Eugene Emeralds pour one out for the M's. They've played in Eugene since 1955. The last piece of funding that the Emeralds needed to build a new stadium to stay alive and stay in Eugene and probably stay in the state of Oregon failed in the form of a bond by Eugene voters on Tuesday. Hey, it's the will of the people. But I will tell you that Eugene losing the Emeralds, after 70 years is it's unfortunate for that community. So
yeah,
that is my thought on that.
Generally, I'm not a fan of any team that is here. We are not naming it Rose City. It is Portland. Period. End of story.
You're not a fan of the Rip City remix?
Okay, that's fine because it's a little bit different.
And also, it's because it's a subsidiary of the Blazers. Exactly. So, Rip City applies specifically to the Blazers.
Yes. And also, it's not a marquee franchise league. It's the G League.
It's a gimmicky league. It's inherently a gimmicky league.
I'm fine with that. Whatever. I don't
meaning the G League, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. But if we're having a WNBA team, it is Portland, Portland, Portland. do not try to name it something else.
Can we recycle names from past professional teams, because there've been a lot of like teams that have come in various sports and gone, various iterations of soccer teams, arena football teams, minor league basketball teams. Like, are any of those available, or does it have to be something that's never been done before? Is there one that you have in
mind?
I do like the Portland Pride, which was an indoor soccer team in my youth. I think it works on many levels, but I also associate it with indoor soccer and the great Jeff Betts. Jeff Betts, if you're a listener to this podcast, my dude, you were so fun to watch in the 90s. Man, at the Rose Garden, indoor soccer was lit. Jeff Betts used to have hair like down to his back, like long blonde hair. And then he also played at the University of Portland. Like, this is a local legend, Jeff Betts. He had hair down like to his the small of his back, right? And then he came back the next season with the Portland Pride, head shaved, 2 earrings, looking like Vin Diesel. One of the greatest character shifts in the history of sports. He went from Fabio to Vin Diesel in like one season. Shout out to Jeff Betts. Shout out to the Portland Pride. But my passion for the indoor soccer team is probably why the WNBA team cannot be called the Portland Pride.
Yeah, I'm not.
Their mascot was a lion. It was cool.
That is cool.
I wonder if I still have that pennant. That's going in my new office. I'm building an office, and eventually this podcast is not going to happen in my basement, surrounded by my children's toys. People always want to know what this thing over my shoulder is. This, like, it looks like large bottles. It is a like ring toss game. Like, there will be no ring toss game in the new office once it's done, but there might be a Portland Pride pennant because those games were fun.
That is an area of knowledge that I was never exposed to as a child. So there you go. It might be. I really don't remember them being around at all. So it might be a dated thing,
So you're saying it's fresh enough to bring back?
Sure. I don't know.
It alliterates. It's like culturally appropriate. Like, it's a lot of pride in the city. It is a obviously a very proudly LGBTQ city. So be an acknowledgement of that community. I think there's a lot there. It doesn't have to be that, but at the moment, I'm pro Portland Pride.
Okay. Well, you're on the record. I gotta think of other names, but I don't know.
You want the fire?
I think we're being a little bit too. I think it's a little like. I mean, you can find problems with anything if you want to find problems with anything.
Okay, Clay Travis.
Well, that's a first in my life. Never had that association. So thank you for that.
Brenna, I want to turn this to a team that does currently exist and is not in the theoretical zone, and that is the Portland Thorns, a team named, by the way. Hold on, timeout. We're going to talk about the Portland Thorns, but I'm going to tell you another story about me naming a sports team.
Oh wow!
And that is when Merritt Paulson bought the Portland Beavers in 2007, 2008, before he brought back the Timbers, before all this. Before he elevated the Timbers to an MLS club, when he bought the Portland Beavers, he did an entire brand identity change with the Beavers. This is obviously before Merritt and I became such good friends. And he, and if you recall, the Beavers used to have a red. They used to be red and black. That was the brand identity. And then Merritt bought the team, and eventually the team started wearing like powder blue, and it was just a different look, right? And they were around for a couple of years in the powder blue. But as part of the brand identity change, Merritt Paulson considered changing the name of the Portland Beavers AAA baseball team. And this is in the heyday of like internet polls. Okay, like 2008. Man, there was nothing that couldn't be solved with an online poll. And Merritt Paulson, I remember, had like a survey. I don't know, it wasn't Merritt, it was somebody who worked for Merritt, but it probably was his idea. Had a survey on PortlandBeavers.com, because probably MILB.com/Portland Beavers or something, but whatever, PortlandBeavers.com, that said, what do you think that the Beavers should be renamed if we rename the Beavers? And I submitted the Portland Thorns. And then 5 or 6 years later, when Merritt has an expansion team, what does he name it? The Portland Thorns. That's right, Merritt Paulson. You owe me. I'll wait. I will wait for the residuals to show up at my door.
You're going to be waiting forever.
But I'm going to do it with this face that only people watching the YouTube show can see, which is very serious right now.
Very serious. Very serious.
Brenna, we're going to talk about the Portland Thorns right now because you have an essential question about the Thorns that you want to ask. In fact, I don't even think it's a question. I think it's a demand.
Yeah.
What is your beef with the Thorns right now?
I mean, I felt so strongly about it. I tweeted about it on vacation. I literally was like, I'm on vacation right now, but I got something to say. It's time to remove the interim tag from Coach Gale. All right? It is time. Rob Gale, come on down. You have, what he has done at this point is historic for this franchise. It's historic for the league. I mean, they're on a 6-game winning streak, and they're going to play a team on a 7-game winning streak, I believe, tonight, on Friday night. That's never happened before in the history of the league. And you know what? Sometimes these things just work. And I don't understand what else this man needs to do to get the interim tag taken off, because it's working. So, yeah, it's time. It's time in my eyes. I understand you're new owners. You want to bring in a big splashy hire, whatever. But look, this is working. So, I can understand the point of view of we don't want to make any quick decisions, and we don't have to make any quick decisions. But I mean, if this guy isn't the head coach of the Thorns next year, he's going to be the head coach of some other NWSL team. I can almost guarantee you that. So why are we waiting? Why are we waiting? And you, what is your response to that? What do you think?
I don't have strong feelings about it because, and you said it, they don't have to make any quick decisions. Ultimately, over the course of a 6-month season, 6 games is a relatively small sample size. And I think that we are past the point of the honeymoon stage with Rob Gale. I mean, we've seen consistent results. I mean, the team seems to love him. I think there is every reason to make him the permanent choice. But for all the reasons you outlined, you can take your time. Nobody's going to come in and hire him mid-season from you. If they were going to do that, that's you can give him the job then. I also would not have a problem with them hiring him right now. I think either way, I agree with you that the results suggest that he is the right guy for this job. So whether you want to wait till, you have a little bit more of a sample size, whether there's a point on the calendar you're waiting for, whether you want to wait until the end of the year. But it would be silly, I think, to get to a point where it's we're in the playoffs. We're, playing for the NWSL championship. We are NWSL champions. Big shout out to our interim coach, Rob Gale. If you continue down this path, it's going to become such an obvious no-brainer. Why haven't you done this yet? And you think we're there.
I think we're there.
I think, it's a long season, so you can give it more time. But I don't know necessarily what else you need to see unless there is someone else you want. If there's somebody else that when you made the change with Mike Norris and you brought in Rob Gale as the interim, if that was all supposed to be a bit of a placeholder until you could go hire whoever, right? Whoever you have identified as the right person, from the entire world of international soccer, it's now becoming a little awkward, right? You'd really have to have some reflective moments. Does it make sense to go bring in this splashy big name outsider who may not connect with the locker room as well as Rob Gale has, who may not deliver the results that Rob Gale has? Are we okay with punting on what we thought plan A was because plan B has turned out to be so good? That could be interesting to watch. But I think on the whole, I agree with you. There's every reason to give this guy the job. There's every reason to think that he is the right choice.
I don't, I don't know what more he can do, and also people have gotten their interim tags removed for less than that. This isn't a situation. I mean, yeah, the Timbers. This is not a situation with the Timbers last year where there was some sort of gray area with the interim head coach, and it was like, oh well, maybe you hire him, maybe you don't. Blah blah blah. No, there's no gray area for me right now. This is working, and there's no reason to stop the train when it is working. Like you said, I'm really good at debating myself. That's like, one of those things. So I bring up the point to myself where I'm like, well, there's no reason to rush, whatever, but reward the man. I mean, come on. So, we shall see. We'll see if they get it to 7 tonight. Boy. And they're doing it without, one of their perennial starters, Morgan Weaver, she's been out the last few games, and I don't think she's going to be back for a little bit. So, yeah, they're very impressive over there, and doing a whole heck of a lot better than their counterparts. Let's put it that way.
There's that for sure. All right, yeah. Brenna. I know I said we were going to get to Pilots baseball. I mean, not to go all Jimmy Kimmel and Matt Damon, but apologies to Matt Damon. But I do want to acknowledge, just because of what of the season they are having, WCC tournament is underway. Mm-hmm. What did you learn about the Pilots? What did you learn about the Pilots this week? And can you give me the 30-second what you need to know about Pilot baseball right now?
What you need to know about Pilot baseball, at least in terms of locally, I mean, there's not a ton of local players on that team, but their starting pitcher rotation is all local. 2 kids from Portland, 1 kid from Kelso. Their kid from Kelso, who's a sophomore, won WCC Pitcher of the Year a few days ago, which is awesome. He's their Sunday pitcher. He wasn't supposed to be starting this year. They had another pitcher get injured, and that's how he ended up starting. And all of a sudden now he's WCC Pitcher of the Year. So we will see how things go. Here's the deal. We will definitely be talking about the Portland Pilots next week if they win the WCC tournament. Mm-hmm. So we shall see how things go. San Diego, by the way, San Diego, whose AD, Kim Yamasi, who was at Oregon State for a very long time, just flipped over in the middle of the year. They're definitely on a roll as well coming into the WCC tournament. They face off later today, and that's going to be a very interesting game to see. So, yeah, it's going to be. They really do have a shot. They have a shot to make the postseason. I'm going to go about 3 months into the womb the last time that they made the postseason. So there you go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was not born yet.
I think my new take on all this is that Oregon State is going independent just to duck the Pilots. That's why Oregon State baseball wants to go independent. They're just ducking the Pilots.
That's it. So. I like it. And you use the word duck in there, which I'm sure that they would just absolutely appreciate. So
Oregon State fans love when I use the word duck in the context of them. Yeah. Okay, Brenna, we're gonna get out of here. Welcome back from vacation. It's great to have you back in the old studio. You had some little flu-like symptoms at the end of your trip. We're sorry to hear about that. I did not see any photos of the Manila carpet, which leads me to think that it is not nearly as cool as either version of the PDX carpet.
I don't recall any carpet in Manila. So
see, I think it was Manila all in it. All right. Well, all right. So we will be back next week. We kind of pushed it to the end of the week this week to let Brenna get caught back up from vacation. Had a lot to unpack, so a little bit of a longer episode. We'll be back next week. We're going to know more about the fate of the local baseball teams. Maybe we'll dive in a little bit to the Blazers draft prep. That sounds like something that you're going to want to come back for. Thank you for listening.
Way to sell the listeners.
I mean, yeah. If you ever want to skip an episode of this podcast, it's the one where we discuss what the Blazers should do with their 2 second-round picks in next month's draft. But all right, we'll be back next week. We'll always have more. We'll find some things. Brenna, great to have you back. Thank you to those of you who listened to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Obviously, let us know what you think in the comments. Do we have comments? Let us know what you think on social media. Tag your friends, tag us, and subscribe, rate us. Yeah, we have comments. There's reviews. Podcasts have reviews. Leave us a positive review.
And that's it. We're out. Peace out.